Welcome to the Mary Ewing Law Show.
Welcome back to the Mary Ewing Law Show. Mary is a veteran Colorado attorney who has spent more than 40 years helping clients recover after car accidents, falls, and other injuries. Known for her clear, steady guidance, she helps people understand what to expect and how to make informed decisions every step of the way. I'm Leann Lyon, and today we are talking about how long a personal injury case really takes and why patience is so important along the way. Hello, Mary. It's great to see you again.
Hey there. Good to be here.
So, Mary, when somebody first hires you after an accident, what is the first thing they want to know about how long their case may take?
Well, usually their question is, how much is my case worth?
Well, there's that one too. We can start with that if you prefer.
Both questions are legitimate, and both questions are usually asked. The first question, how much is my case worth? I usually say, I don't know. We need to see how you get along, how well you recover. I'd love to think you called me a week from now and said, "Hey, I'm feeling great. Can we settle my case?" That really doesn't happen, but I'd love to think it would, because the reality is the best thing for the person is to completely heal.
Yes.
The best thing for their lawsuit is for them not to heal. Obviously, I want what's best for the client, but things take time. Healing takes time. The injured person may not, when they first come in, it may be right after the accident, and they've just begun the journey of finding out what their injuries are. They're in the process of having testing done, exams done, seeing specialists, having various types of radiographic studies, having physical therapy, trying to figure out if they're going to be able to go back to work. It's a complicated process, depending upon, of course, how badly they're injured. So the case may take a long time, but time is on their side in terms of the litigation.
Indeed. Can you explain why it's risky to settle too early before all the medical care is complete?
Let's say surgery's been recommended and the client says, "No, I don't want to have surgery. I just want to settle my case." Well, what's the net result of that? In 3 months' time, let's say they settle. 3 months' time, they may realize, "Oh, gee, I really can't stand this pain or this disability or whatever. I gotta go have surgery." And then they have a really bad result. But of course, the negotiations to settle the case before surgery are all based on the representation that the surgery is gonna be great for them, and they're gonna have a great result. So they're gonna get a lot less compensation than they are entitled to if they settle too early.
So, what are some of the stages of a typical, if there is such a thing, personal injury case from the first consultation to a final settlement or verdict?
Very good question, Leann, and I'm sure one that people wanna know, and I try to always explain to my client. I explain when I'm hired that, I'm gonna be entering an appearance, whether there's an ongoing litigation or whether it's still at the insurance claim. If it's the insurance claim, I'm gonna send the insurance company a notification letter. I'm gonna get the accident report. It may be that there's more than one, um, insurance company involved. One of the first things I've gotta think about is there a pending statute of limitations problem? Or the more difficult is the notice requirements that may be important. For example, if a governmental entity is being sued, you have not 180 days to file a very specific notice requirement to very specific governmental entities. Now, you may not know that there's a governmental entity involved. It could be, let's say, you slipped on some steps going into a building, and the steps were wet, and there's a claim against the owner of the building, or not necessarily the owner, the occupier or the lessee. You don't know when they came in, whether who owns that building or who manages it. Could be a governmental entity that has to be given notice. Really a catch-all, and there's very little exceptions for not making that deadline. There are also limitations on what governmental entities you can sue, so that affects liability. From the accident report, it will tell me if it's an auto case, that will tell me who the parties are and maybe who the insurance company is, and maybe whether the adverse driver was operating a vehicle through the course and scope of his employment or her employment, so that there's an employer responsible as well as the driver. So those are all things that when I meet with the client, I have to get all that information. I don't have a written checklist, but from doing it all these years, I have a mental checklist that goes through. And since, and I'm listening to the client and paying attention to what their questions are, but I'm also asking questions. It may be that we want to get someone out right away to photograph the vehicles or photograph the accident scene, or maybe get the weather records if it's during the winter. All sorts of things like that that come into play in the very initial process where you're looking at who might be responsible, what happened, what are the guardrails around this case that I have to think about in terms of notice, statute of limitations, who to notify, who's responsible, who are the witnesses, what do they have to say? And one thing that's really becoming important in the last several years is finding out vehicles that have webcams. I had a case not that long ago in which it looked like my client was at fault for reading the accident report, and he was badly injured, but a driver going by had a webcam video, and that made the case, and the case settled for policy limits. And, you don't necessarily know now, but a lot of intersections are controlled by webcams. So looking for that evidence to find out what's there, how can we prove, and what is the other side going to prove? You go get hurt at Safeway, you slip and fall at Safeway. There are probably videos of that. So you've got to think about when you notify the adverse party of your representation that you also need to tell them that they must retain and preserve any evidence in their possession. And if they fail to do so, there'll be an adverse inference as to what it would have shown had they not preserved that. So all these things that you've gotta know to do, that you learn over a lot of years of practice, a lot of cases where maybe you didn't remember to do that, you learned the hard way. But that's the initial. Then over the course of time, I'm helping the client to be sure that they are following up on medical treatment, that they're getting the medical treatment that they deserve, that they need, that they're going to see specialists that they need. To do that, they may have boundaries by their insurance company, but it's part of documenting what their claim is worth. When do they go back to work? Do they go back to work, but they can only work part-time? Or they can work, but on restrictions? What's the employer saying about that? Are they sympathetic or are they giving them a hard time? Is the client getting emotional support? What kind of things is the client unable to do? What kind of things is the client able to do, but doesn't do because it hurts? Maybe they don't play golf anymore. They could play golf, but it hurts. You don't do something for fun that hurts. I always also tell them, be aware of any car parked in front of your home with darkened windows or particularly a panel truck, because guess what? There may be an adverse party, insurance company or whomever, videoing you, and they're gonna catch you the one time that you carried out the garbage and you went in and had to lay down for 3 days. But they'll catch that and claim that, "Oh, you're not hurt. Look, we got you on camera. Look at what you were doing." Or they follow you around and watch you playing tennis or something. I mean, it's a dirty world out there, but the insurance company's job is to take in premiums and pay as little as they can. If the if it's a car accident, and the adverse driver is either uninsured or underinsured, then my client's insurance may provide special coverage called uninsured, underinsured insurance. And so all of a sudden you're adverse to your insurance company. Um, so that's the process. At some point, the client's condition, medical, employment, what have you, has reached a plateau. They're not necessarily cured, but they're not really getting significantly better. And do I need to hire a certain experts, like a vocational rehabilitation expert, to say, well, this client can't do that job anymore, but there are these other jobs that the client could do. I may need a forensic accountant or economist to testify to what the um, spread out over the working life of the client, what the loss of income is going to be, and what the cost of medical care is going to be. And then they have to reduce it to present value, and I'm not gonna bore you with all the details about how you do that. Just think of it this way, a dollar today is worth more than a dollar 20 years from now. But if if you're not able to reach a settlement, then you have to file suit and you proceed to go through the litigation process. There was once a time when I filed suit right away, knowing that it was going to be a year to a year and a half before you got to trial, and that was about the time that would take my client to condition to recover. I don't do that anymore. I mean, I talk to the client and explain why, but the reason is that, um, for one thing, litigation is so expensive. It just ramps up the cost, the out-of-pocket cost that the client is going to have. Also, they're dealing with having to recover from their injuries, dealing with all the things with their injuries, their employment, and all of a sudden they've got the stress of the litigation on top of that. So I like to think that if I properly document my client's injuries, however that might be required, and submit it to the insurance company, even maybe having a mediation before we file suit, that we could get a resolution of the case in a better time frame for the client. The downside to that is that if you don't settle and you have to file suit, then and if you can't resolve it during the litigation, which often you can, but if you can't, then you're another year down the line, and that can be very frustrating for the client.
Having been through a pretty significant personal injury case in my family, I will say I'm so glad we contacted an attorney right away. It actually relieved a lot of stress from us because they did take care of, they collected the bills. They made sure that, that things were kept at bay, that we were able to focus on the healing that needed to happen. And yes, I'm a huge fan of webcams. Dashboard cams, yes. Absolutely. So, as we wrap up today, and this is for anyone listening who feels stuck or frustrated waiting on their case, what would you tell them to, in terms of staying patient and focused on the long-term outcome, excuse me. Income too, maybe.
Well, I tell them, let me take the burden that you have and put it on my shoulders for what I can handle. Following up with you to go to medical appointments, documenting your injuries, getting copies of your medical bills, making sure your health insurance is paying for your medical expenses. You, the client, can then focus on what matters most to you: healing, dealing with your employment, dealing with living on perhaps a reduced income, um, seeking counseling for your injuries. Those are things that only the client can handle. But everything to do with the legal aspects, I'll put that in a big lump sum, I handle. Let me take that burden on.
And it's appreciated and needed. So thank you, Mary. And to our audience, that is it for today's episode of the Mary Ewing Law Show. If you have been injured in Colorado and want clear, honest guidance about your case, visit maryewinglaw.com or call 303-886-5400. Thank you for listening, and be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a review so more people can find the help they need after an accident. Thanks again, Mary.
You bet. My pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.